Cubs fans, hate to break it to you, the 2025 free agent list does not look very exciting, especially given the holes that are in for the Chicago Cubs. And this is going to be a confusing offseason. I've mentioned it. The reason I use that terminology, I think, is just because we're going to be left with a lot of bittersweet feelings, I think, this offseason. I think there's going to be we're either going to ship off prospects or we're going to ship off guys like Nico Horners, maybe even a Jamison Tyone who had a really great season. There might be trades like that you're just kind of like, oh, I'm excited for what could be, but I'm also not that excited for what just happened because I like that player. I like the thought of what that player was going to do. So when we talk about that and making room for this team, that's what has to happen in order for them to even consider some of these free agents, especially position players, not necessarily pitchers. But I'm just looking at the list, and I'm not that excited. So we'll start with catcher because that's the biggest thing for the Cubs right now, right? And I've never been able to say Kyle's last name, Higashika. I will say if this is and by the way, this is on MLB.com. On the left side is their age. On the right side is their WAR. This is for the last 2 years of WAR, not for this year of WAR. And it's according to Fangraphs. Kyle is 35 years old. Travis d'Arnaud, 36 years old, 2.5. Danny Jansen, who was having a great first half of the season, really plummeted in the second half this last year. He's only 30 years old. That would probably be the one that I'd be the most excited about. However, he only hitting something like 206. And on the right side here, by the way, if you're listening on the podcast, I would definittefinitely go over to the YouTube channel so you can see what I'm looking at. But on the right side here, I've got Baseball Reference up, and we'll just kind of look at the numbers. I mean, in 2024, he was a .7 WAR player, according to Baseball Reference, only 9 home runs and a 205 batting average. So what does that come out to as the OPS? OPS here in 2024 combined, because he was on 2 different teams, was 658. Miguel Amaya, I'm pretty sure, was flirting with that, and we were not happy with Miguel Amaya's first half of the season. Miguel Amaya was at, what was his OPS? His OPS was, basically the same, 644. So 658 compared to 644. We're essentially asking for 2 Miguel Amayas there. And Miguel Amaya was a 1.8 WAR player. So even if you bring in a guy like Danny Jansen, you're probably looking at him as a backup because Miguel Amaya, according to Baseball Reference, was a full game ahead of him. Travis d'Arnaud, again, getting up there in age. Danny Jansen. Gary Sanchez is a complete wild card. When you look at Gary Sanchez's last few years here, take a look at this. Especially from a WAR perspective, since we're focusing so much on that. Overall WAR right here in 24.2 and 23 combined, he was a 2.4, which you're like, yeah, all day long. But then in 22, he was 0.8, 21, 0.7. He's a guy that is a little bit too much of a wild card to me. I like Austin Hedges from a defensive standpoint, one of the best framers in the game. Elias Diaz, again, he's old. Jacob Stallings, no thank you. James McCann, no thank you. Yan Gomes, we already went down that road, and it just gets bad from there. So when you look at a catching situation, I think really in 2025, the Cubs are probably thinking to themselves, hey, we're going to have Miguel Amaya as our number one catcher, unless barring some sort of trade. There's an opportunity there because all these other guys are either up there in age and aren't going to be durable enough to be considered a number one catcher, or they are just not reliable. Miguel Amaya all the way. Slot in maybe like Austin Hedges or Danny Jansen as a secondary catcher, and at least it's better than what you had going into the year this last year. Although I would say, based on what we thought of the Yan Gomes and Miguel Amaya tandem, I thought we were in a pretty good situation going into the year because Miguel Amaya did have a decent rookie season. Yan Gomes was coming off one of his best offensive seasons. So it's one of those positions, too, you just get worn down, right? And there's a lot of potential turnover there. All right, first base is one of those that we don't need, but could have a conversation about. And once again, I'm just not excited about the potential here. Christian Walker, yes, all day long. And what has to happen for the Cubs to actually need a first baseman? Well, it means a trade of either Michael Busch, who has another, 5 years of team control, 6 years of team control. Probably not going to happen, considering that he was a rookie and had a 775 OPS. He had flashes of greatness, had 5 home runs in a row there in April. I think it was April. Had some stretches where he wasn't very good, but you look at Christian Walker, he's had some great seasons recently. 3 years in a row of an OPS over 800. You'll take that every day that ends in Y, but 34 years old. So if you're going to do that, do you give up youth for a guy that you may only have for a couple years? I don't think so. I don't think that's where the Cubs are headed. So I don't think Christian Walker is going to be an option for Chicago. I think going into last year in 2023, he would have been an option for the Cubs, but not this year. Pete Alonso, 30 years old. This is the biggest one that everyone keeps talking about. In fact, I just posted on our YouTube channel, hey, if you switched Michael Busch over to second base, you've got a lefty-righty platoon with Matt Shaw and Michael Busch. Nico Horner, trade him for a reliever. All that sounds great to me. The only thing is I don't personally want Pete Alonso on my team. I think he is a defensive liability, a major defensive liability, and you'll see that here on Baseball Reference under the D-WAR. Has never in his career had a positive defensive WAR season. That's not good. That's not good, guys. I mean, the offensive WAR for a few years there was unreal, but defensive WAR, no thank you. So, especially when you look at just his overall WAR as a player. Now, depending on where you look at, right here, he was a 2.6 WAR player in 2024. Now, compare that to Michael Busch. Again, depending on if you like Fangraphs or if you like Baseball Reference. Michael Busch, according to Baseball Reference, was a 2.8. Okay, so Pete Alonso has Scott Boras as his agent. Pete Alonso, aside from the last couple games, has been going off in the playoffs, and you know that Scott Boras is going to be like, look, you've got a all-star. Think about what he did with Cody Bellinger last year. Cody Bellinger, he's an all-star, he's an MVP, he's a rookie of the year. Well, he deserves 7 or 8 years. That's past Cody Bellinger. Well, what's he going to do? He's going to do the same thing with Pete Alonso. He's going to be like, hey, look, Pete Alonso, he's a 1, 2, 3, 4-time All-Star, including each of the last 3 years. He's been an MVP runner-up here he was Rookie of the Year in 2019. He was the MVP, eighth place vote MVP in 2022. He was the 7th place MVP vote in 2019 as rookie season. But look at the OPS plus. It's just gone down and down and down every year. Aside from 2022, it jumped back up. He had a really good 2022. But then here in the last 2 years, I mean, look at this. This is the most concerning thing for me. And I know the league overall has gone down in batting average, but to go from a 271 batter in 2022 at an 869 OPS, then only 821 the next year and a 217 batting average. And the only reason that he really was able to keep that OPS up as high as he did is because his slugging stayed nearly the same, where the OPS or where the batting average and on-base percentage dropped dramatically. And especially this last year, 788 OPS. A 123 OPS plus, which is really the only number that we have to look at when we look at OPS, which is great. 123, I believe, would be top on the team for the Cubs, maybe second. I think Seiya. Let's look at Seiya really quick, what his OPS plus was. Seiya's OPS plus was 138, so he would be, I believe, that second on the team. I don't think anyone else had that close to an OPS plus, including Michael Busch, who was at 775. So from an offensive standpoint, Pete Alonso has too much of this downward dip, and at 30 years old, to think that, if he was 26, 27 years old, like a Vlad Guerrero, who had a couple of down years and now he had a phenomenal season, you expect that turnaround. At 30 years old, I don't know if I expect that, especially knowing that Scott Boras is going to want 5 or 6 years. He's a defensive liability. Michael Busch literally turned into, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 3 candidate for Gold Glove over there at first base, maybe even winning the Gold Glove. I think he's a guy that if you stay with him, he's not going to be an Anthony Rizzo. I'm not putting that on him, but I think he's a guy that at least has the flexibility to be a first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, so keep him. And if you're going to replace him at first base, well, do it with someone that you know is going to be in a long-term plan. I know that Owen Casey was tried out at first base during spring training last year. I don't know if that's still in the cards for someone like an Owen Casey to move over to first base. And then you've got me kind of excited there of like, hey, what does that look like? Given the season that Vlad Guerrero just had, I know a lot of people want to go trade for him. I don't think that's going to happen, especially with as much as the Blue Jays are going to want to ask for him now. Maybe a couple of years ago, going into the 24 offseason, value is down a little bit, maybe then, but now you're going to have to give up 2 or 3 top 10 prospects, I think, for someone like Vlad Guerrero. And then, the rest of them are, once again, just not exciting. Carlos Santana, old. Paul Goldschmidt, coming off one of his worst seasons, if not his worst season. Justin Turner, old. Bring back Anthony Rizzo? Yeah, if we didn't have Michael Busch. I would love to see Anthony Rizzo end his career with the Cubs. Definitely not Joey Gallo. Wilmer Flores has gone down the last couple years. No thank you, Josh Bell. Rhys Hopkins, we already went down that road, and he's been an injury-plagued player. We already tried Garrett Cooper, and then the rest, Ratty Telez, no thanks, unless he's going to be a relief pitcher. Second baseman, we're good there because it's either going to be Horner, Shaw, or Bush. Shortstop, we're good there till 2029, I believe, is when Dansby's contract ends. Third base, here's an interesting one, because we have team control of Isaac Paredes until the end of the 2027 season going into 2028. So that's 2 years. The next 2 years, you're going to pay, it looks like, probably right around $6 million to $7 million this next year if he's going to exceed what he made last year. Did not have a good campaign with the Cubs. Had a pretty miserable second half really from July on, and was an all-star in the first half of the season. So what are you going to get from Isaac Paredes? Do you roll the dice and say he's going to turn it around? Or do you say, hey, you ended up actually being a defensive liability, which was what we brought you in for, to really be a defensive stronghold at third base. And while you still have a little bit of value because you have 2 years left on your contract, we're going to trade you. Okay, let's just assume for a second that happens. Well, you still have Matt Shaw, and then you can keep Nico Horner. Or if they don't go that route, is there a third baseman? Well, I absolutely love Alex Bregman. But once again, I'm pretty sure Alex Bregman is a Scott Boras guy. Alex Bregman, Scott Boras, let's see. Yep, Scott Boras, at least according to Google and the Houston Chronicle. So at 31 years old, Alex Bregman is definitely the best third baseman on the market. But once again, let's look at the trends, right? Because one of the biggest issues in baseball is teams pay players for what they have done, not what they're going to do. It's one of the biggest issues that I think is it's an epidemic in baseball. And if you look at it from an OPS plus standpoint, look at these phenomenal years. 2019, 162. Then suddenly, boom, drop down to 117, 113. Jump back up in 2022 to 134. 2023, 122. 2024, 118. Okay? 118, once again, is not going to make you the best player on the Cubs. And you know that Scott Boras is going to ask for amazing money for a guy like Alex Bregman, who's a 2-time All-Star, who was 5th in MVP voting in 2018, 2nd in MVP voting in 2019, had MVP votes in 2022, and for some reason in 2023, don't really understand that. From a defensive standpoint, he's a solid defender. Okay, he's always had a positive defensive WAR, including his tied for second best year in defensive WAR here in 2024. Third best year at 1.0. So he's locking it down at third base. He's definitely a number 2 through number 5 hitter for your team. I like that. I just don't like the trend of going down the last few years. But if you can trade Isaac Paredes, and this means holding on to Nico Horner and giving Matt Shaw a little bit more of a comfortable, hey, we're not going to force you into being a starting second baseman or third baseman for the Cubs going into 2025, and you can get Bregman on, call it a 4 to 6 year deal, which again, Scott Boras is probably going to try to push this to 7 or 8 years, making him 38, 39 years old. But if the Cubs can do kind of a Cody Bellinger thing where it's like, hey, you got some opt-outs, we've got some opt-outs for the first few years, I really do like Alex Bregman, and I will tell you right now, I like him a lot more than Isaac Paredes. And again, just to remind you guys, like Isaac, I know we got a really bad version of him. I know that, like, I'm not going to ignore that fact. But he still, in 2024, was a 2.7 WAR player. 2.7 WAR is pretty phenomenal. Now let's see what it was for his time on the Cubs. He was only a 0.5 WAR player for the Cubs. He was a 2.5 WAR on it from an offensive standpoint for the Rays. And his numbers were not good with the Cubs. I think he only hit 3 home runs, which is pretty pitiful considering he played in 52 games and had 212 plate appearances. That's bad. And OPS 633 with the Cubs. Not good. Overall, 739 OPS in 2024. But the year before, he was an 840 OPS guy, a 130 OPS plus. The year before, 740 and a 113 OPS plus. He had this trend, right? This uptick. And again, 2020, he only played 34 games. 2021, he only played 23 games. But he had this uptick in 2022 where he was given essentially the starting role for the Rays. And he performed. He had 20 home runs, only 45 RBIs, which is pretty crazy to think that you would have 20 home runs and only 45 RBIs in 111 games. But then in 2023, almost had 100 RBIs in what wasn't even a full season, 143 games. And then here in 2024, even though it was not that great of a year, still 80 RBIs. If you don't like RBIs, that's your thing, but I still put some weight into that. The thing is, like, which version are you going to get of him? And I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of hope because there is still that player in there, 31 home run and 130 OPS plus kind of guy that if he does do that, then you're really happy. But again, the Cubs have done a really bad job of hoping for the Eric Mancinis to turn it around. I keep on combining Eric Hosmer and Trey Mancini. The Trey Mancinis, the Eric Hosmers, the Jan Gomeses of the world. They put a lot of weight in these guys to hopefully repeat previous years that were surprising or to turn it around. The Cody Bellingers, even though that was a quote-unquote successful turnaround, it doesn't happen very often. Eugenio Suarez, club option, they probably keep him because he did a pretty good job, and the D-backs are moving in a positive direction. No thank you, J.D. Davis. No thank you for the rest of these guys. I'd rather keep Isaac Paredes if I'm not getting an Alex Bregman. That's where I'm at. Let me know what you think of the third base situation. Now, outfield, I'm not even going to touch it because the problem with the Cubs outfield is that they have good/great talent at the major leagues, and they have great/potential superstar talent in the minor leagues, but we all know how that could potentially pan out. So I think there's going to be an outfielder or two that the Cubs end up trading this offseason that are in the minor leagues, which would be disappointing to see. But once again, that's why I say this is going to be kind of a confusing offseason. Now, designated hitters, okay? Marcell Ozuna has a club option. Probably is going to stay. Had an amazing year. Jock Peterson, we already went down that road. No, thank you. JD Martinez did not have a good season. Andrew McCutchen, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on. I don't think any of these guys are really worth it. Once again, So are you just saying, hey, Seiya Suzuki is our DH? It worked really well for the Cubs. Worked extremely well. In fact, let's just take a really quick look here on Seiya Suzuki's numbers once he went into a full-time DH role. 3.5 WAR player. I mean, I know Cubs Twitter and a lot of people, including myself, are kind of like, man, Seiya Suzuki, he doesn't feel like that great of a player. But when you look at the numbers at the end of the season, it's really impressive. I think we just get in this mode of like, he's supposed to hit all these home runs. He's supposed to be a superstar player. Like, we didn't pay him superstar money, just so you guys know. If you forget, we did not pay him superstar money. Okay, when he was playing DH only, you're going to see it turn to DH only here pretty soon, and it's right around here. I believe, yeah, so August 16th until the end of the season, what did Seiya Suzuki do? He had 37 games. He hit 5 home runs, had a total of 14 extra base hits. He hit .326 and had an OPS of .933. That is phenomenal. Give Seiya Suzuki the DH position. Let him forget about all of his woes in right field. Let Cody Bellinger probably off back in. If he doesn't, then give it to Owen Casey over there in right field. And now you don't have to trade him away. You can give him an opportunity. If it doesn't work out, you've still got, maybe you hold on to Mike Tauchman, who has been very much a high contributor on the team. Maybe you keep Kevin Alcantara and put him in right field if Owen Casey can't hack it. You've got options there, okay? So I like Seiya Suzuki staying as a DH. But once again, all of this, like, this is all the confusing part, is that with there being not so great offensive options in the free agent market, and the Cubs having all of these, well, we could do this, but maybe this would happen, and what if we regret this, yada, yada. That's why it's going to be a confusing offseason. The only clear-cut thing to me would be trading Isaac Paredes to move Alex Bregman over to third base. Get Alex Bregman, put him over at third base, let Isaac Paredes go, and roll the dice. Give him 5-6 years. Though I wouldn't do more than that, but I would do that. I would try that at least. The Cubs need to try something, and that again to me ends up saying, well, now we know that Matt Shaw, who should be a second baseman at least by the latest 2026, when Nico Horner is at the end of his contract. And then from a pitching perspective, because we need lots of pitching, I'm not excited about the pitching market either. You know, Garrett Cole is not going to opt out. The Yankees are his favorite team. Blake Snell, even if he does opt out, I don't want him. I didn't want him even after his Cy Young year because of exactly what happened this year. It just feels like the guy is too much of a wild card. I don't know this name, but I know I don't like his age, 34. Michael Wacha, he had a good year, but that's a player option, and the Royals are on the upswing, so I don't think that Michael Wacha is going anywhere. Freddie Peralta, club option. With where the Brewers are, the kind of season he just had, they're probably going to exercise that. Max Fried. I like Max Fried. Corbin Burns. I semi-like Corbin Burns. Why do I semi-like Corbin Burns? I'll show you why. A lot of people think of Corbin Burns, and they think of the Corbin Burns from, what was that? Was that 2021? I think it was 2021. Still 3.4 WAR player here in 2024 with a 2.92 ERA. I like it. I like it a lot. But I'm going to show you why I don't necessarily like it here in a second. 2.43 ERA in 2021. He struck out almost a career high. The next year was the career high. 234 batters in only 167 innings as a starter. That's mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. 28 starts. Each of the last 3 years, he's had 30 starts. I like that. I like that a lot. But look at the strikeout numbers. You went from striking out 234 batters in 167 innings. Okay. That, how can we do some quick math on that? 234 divided by 167 times 9 innings. He was striking out 12.6 batters per 9 innings back in 2021. Here in 2024, it's gone down every year. Not the strikeouts. So the strikeout number in 2022 went up, 243, but he had 202 innings pitched. Here in 2024, 181 divided by 194 times 9 is only 8.39 strikeouts per 9 innings. The amount that the strikeouts have gone down in the last 4 years is concerning. It's very concerning. Now, you could say, well, he's just learned how to pitch to contact so that he can go deeper into games. And that's all fine because he has been durable. The last 3 years, 202 innings, 193 and 2/3, 194 and 1/3. That would lead the Cubs, I believe, each of the last 3 seasons. I'm not concerned about the results. I'm concerned about the longevity because at the age of 30 years old, coming off of 4 consecutive All-Star seasons, this is the kind of contract that either you're happy about or it flops. I don't see Corbin Burnes suddenly turning 2021 Corbin Burnes back on, striking everyone and their mom out, and you being like, oh my gosh, he's exceeded expectations of his contract. I think this is like a, who can I think of? John Lester was in his prime, so not a John Lester. Almost like maybe a Matt Garza. Like I think of Matt Garza. He was okay as a Cub. He was pretty good for a couple of years, and then it was like, okay, your time has passed. That's kind of what I think of with Corbin Burnes. I think it would be like, okay, the first 2 years, that was pretty good. It wasn't like phenomenal, but hey, he was an all-star one of those years, and he had close to 190 innings, but then after that, it's just going to be like, that's where I see the Corbin Burnes thing happening. I could be completely wrong. Outside of that, I like Nathan Eovaldi, but he's getting too old. Max Fried, I skipped over him, but I would take him in a heartbeat, 31 years old. He's friends with Dansby Swanson. He was actually on Dansby Swanson's podcast that he started this last year, so I could see Dansby bringing him over. Stats really quick on Max Fried. I think he was injured for a little bit of this year. Maybe not. 3.5, just like Corbin Burnes. And I think that you get Max Fried at a little bit of a discount, but here's the thing. Justin Steele, Jordan Wicks, Shota Imanaga, Max Fried, 4 lefties in the starting rotation. That's a lot of lefties. That could be dangerous for a right-handed heavy hitting lineup, especially in a playoff position. Of course, Jordan Wicks, I don't think we can really consider to be like a lock. Pretty interesting to actually put some weight into that. Now, 2023 was the season that he had some injuries. 2024, he was 11-10 in 29 starts and 174 innings and a third and a 3.25 ERA. I'll take that every day. Absolutely. If you can get him on a long-term contract, 5-6 years, I'll take it. I will absolutely take that. Jack Flaherty, that's an interesting one. 29 years old, has completely turned around his career. You can see what he's doing in the playoffs. Once again, I think whatever he does in the playoffs, they're going to leverage that and say, well, this is the kind of player you're getting. And I think that's a little bit sketch, especially when you look at his last few seasons. Look at Jack Flaherty, last few seasons here. 3.1 WAR in 2024. That's phenomenal. But in 2023 combined for a, 4.99 ERA. 2022, 4.25. 2021, he was, if you notice, look at this. He was really healthy in his first 3 years. Rookie in 2017, 2018, he had 28 starts, 3.34 ERA. 2019, 33 starts, 2.75 ERA. Definitely his best year. But then after that, injuries. 2023, he was back and fully healthy, but a 4.99 ERA. This year, back and fully healthy, a 3.17 ERA. So that just begs the question, are you going to get 2018, 2019 version of Jack Flaherty, or are you going to get 2000, and I should say 2020, it wasn't that he was unhealthy. It was COVID, so that's why you only see 9 starts. But still not a good year, 4.91. Or you're going to get, the 20 20 to 2022 version of him, 23 version of him, where he's either not healthy or not producing. Nick Martinez is decent, but he's older. Again, 34 years old. Jordan Montgomery probably is going to have to stay with the Diamondbacks. It's a player option, and he did not have a good year at all. No thank you, Kyle Gibson. Justin Verlander, old. The only reason you sign him is for some sort of just bringing some experience to the team. And then beyond that, you just get down to these guys where it's like, we have better starters than this. So I'm not super excited unless it's a Corbin Burnes or unless it's a Max Fried. And I think based on what we know about Jed and the Cubs, if they're going to go a certain direction, it's probably going to be more of a Max Fried or a Jack Flaherty, who's going to be a lot more of a cost-effective option rather than Corbin Burnes based on health and based on the last 3 years. So, Shane Bieber, by the way, he's coming off Tommy John. I could absolutely see the Cubs signing him because of the fact that he hasn't pitched the last couple of years, and that's the kind of project that Jed likes to take on and hopefully turns into a success story. But that's not a like win now mentality. That's just barely skipping by. And then relief pitchers, Tanner Scott, yes, all day long, 100%, immediately becomes the best option for the Cubs in the bullpen, and completely changes the look of this because for the last 2 years they haven't had a dominant lefty out of the bullpen, and that fixes that situation right there. So go after Tanner Scott, please get Tanner Scott. The only thing I think I remember about Tanner Scott is he's a little bit wild, if I remember correctly. Let's look at the walks to Ks. 4.0 WAR player. 175 ERA. I think he had a little bit more of a rough go of it with San Diego. No, not rough at all. 273 ERA. That we'll still take that. But a 118 ERA while he's with Miami here in this year. Year before, 2023 was a 2.31 ERA. Walks. Yeah. So he walks a decent amount of guys. In 72 innings, 36 walks in 2024. The year before, not as many walks. Year before that, 2022, a ton of walks. So he is a little bit wild, but with the stuff and the fact that you need a lockdown, high-leverage relief guy, go after Tanner Scott. Jeff Hoffman, interesting one, had a phenomenal year with the Phillies. Absolutely phenomenal. The last couple of years have been pretty good. 2023, a 2.41 ERA, 2017, 2024, a 2.17 ERA. This year he was a 2.0 WAR player as a reliever, still very good. He's striking out well above 9 per 9 innings or 1 per every inning. But if you look at it before 2023, 2022, he was 3.83 ERA. And then he was just bad before that. Like he was really bad. You have to also look at the fact that he pitched in Colorado, right? That's going to be something that no matter what is always going to impact a player's ERA. But Cincinnati was just kind of and then suddenly he turns it on with the Phillies. So, you just got to wonder, like, player development, pitcher development. Phillies have something that they found that is transferable to another team. So there's question marks around Jeff Hoffman, but I would take him, absolutely. David Robertson, too old. Rolls Chapman, too old. Clay Holmes, no. He has had so many issues. And that might be one of those things that, like, okay, he just needs a change of scenery. The Yankees are not going to re-sign him based on all the issues they had this year. Kenley Jansen, too old. Chris Martin, too old. Carlos Estevez. I don't know much about Carlos Estevez. Let's look at that really quick. 2.1 WAR player here in 2024. I like that. 2.45 ERA with the Angels. And 2023, 3.9. 2022, 3.47 ERA. And then before that, once again, in Colorado, so we're just not going to take that into consideration. So, I like him based on what I'm seeing. 2.57 ERA with the Phillies after starting the year with the Angels. Does he strike out a lot of guys? Doesn't strike out a lot of guys, less than a strikeout per inning. But does he walk many? Doesn't walk very many. So I like it. that probably would be cost effective, I would assume. And he's 32, signed him to a 2-3 year deal. I like it. And then from there, I don't know. I don't really see any names that jump out. So I think what you're looking at is, once again, it's either going to be Tanner Scott, Jeff Hoffman, or a guy like a Clay Holmes who you're hoping is turning it around with the Cubs, or a Carlos Estevez who's going to be probably a little bit more cost effective. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. We're also going to talk about trades as we continue this offseason, so we're going to have some fun.